In the past 30 years or so, scientists have been doing evolutionary experiments in the laboratory. They've taken bacteria or viruses and allowed them to grow, and because they're so tiny, they grow pretty quickly and in huge numbers. Trillions of little bacterial cells have been tracked for tens of thousands of generations, and news stories have come out saying, oh, they're evolving, they're changing, they're growing better, faster, and so on, and all variations on that. But what they usually don't tell you is that virtually all of those mutations, the helpful mutations, the ones that allow it to grow faster, are ones that break genes or degrade genes that were already there. They're not building new complex systems. They're destroying complex systems. For example, a very helpful mutation in a laboratory experiment looking at a bacterial evolution showed that the mutant bacteria could grow 5% faster than the ancestor bacteria. And that's huge difference because in 20 generations, that one that's growing 5% faster will pretty much take over the flask and eliminate the ancestral variation. But if you look at the molecular details, which is where you have to go to evaluate Darwin's theory, because mutations are changes in molecules. They're not just changes in the outward features of an organism. So if you look at the molecular changes in that bacterium, it turns out that the genes that make a particular kind of sugar called ribose were destroyed. They were wrecked by another piece of DNA which randomly inserted in them and destroyed their function. And that helped. That helped in the circumstance. It turns out that removing or throwing away parts can be beneficial in some instances. For example, suppose you wanted your car to get better gas mileage and your life depended on getting better gas mileage right now. What could you do quickly to achieve that? Well, you could take off the hood and throw it away. You could take out the spare tires in the back seat and throw them away. And the lighter car might now get better gas mileage, and that might help in the circumstances, but you've only achieved that by throwing away things that had been useful in other circumstances, and you're missing those now. And that doesn't explain where the car came from in the first place, or even the hood or the seats that you threw away. As science has advanced and developed the technique to look much more closely at the mutations, the DNA changes that accompany evolution, we're learning that the large majority of helpful, beneficial mutations are indeed the ones that break genes or throw them away. And I call that devolution rather than evolution, because you're becoming simpler, not more complex. So don't be misled by big news stories on how fantastic evolution is, because when you soberly examine the process behind it, you see that they're not increasing in complexity or sophistication. Rather, it's the opposite.